I think there's been some guys hanging around that long. Hey, if you got this part of the video, you've got the live unedited edition. It is Home Gadget Geeks. It's the 17th of September, 2020. If you got this any other time than 8 p.m. in the Central Time Zone, 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain, 6 Pacific, you've got the recorded version, and that's okay. Hang tight. We have a little bit of a pre-show here. Sometimes the pre-show is better than the actual show. You never know. So hang out, hang with us for a second. We'll give all the notification engines some time. And I had some trouble with YouTube today. Why is that not going live? Let's hold on. Let's get that reset there. I had some trouble. Daniel did a podcast earlier today for work, and I do this kind of process. There we go. To make Spreaker work, and the video never came on. So basically, the video comes on, and then I just feed the video audio into Spreaker, so it creates the video feed or the audio feed. And so I checked it, and then I looked away, and I never looked back, and the video never came on. So I have 45 minutes of blank.
Important stuff I've learned you need to keep in front of you.
Yeah.
I've working with external recorders, I've had it off to the side, and then that made it so easy to forget to press record. Or even like with the Rodecaster Pro, which is now kind of off to the side where I used to put my mixer. I use an SD card, which, by the way, side note, do you want me to record my separate track?
No,
okay.
I just take what's on YouTube.
I got this really fast, high capacity SD card, a micro SD card for the Rodecaster Pro, and it's not completely compatible. If I don't format it before every recording, it's very likely the Rodecaster Pro just stops after a minute or two.
Yeah.
So that's something I've thought about, like moving the Rodecaster Pro in front of me so I can see that green button, especially like since I've had to switch back to glasses for a little while. The rim of my glasses is right where that button is, so I can't even see it in my peripheral vision.
Kind of blocks it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have it. It's to the right and up. And once it's going, it's solid. And all I need to do is just check it one time, while it's going. And I maybe get 5 or 10 folks who listen to the live show on Spreaker, so it's not a big deal. Used to be more. When we were traveling, folks used to use the Spreaker feed as the live feed. And I have an app, that Home Gadget Geeks app, that folks could use. And that was the best way on a Thursday night while you were traveling to kind of listen to it on the road. Well, most people aren't traveling anymore, right? And so that the app usage diminished. But it's always a good reminder. The fail safe is always YouTube. Like if YouTube's not working, we're not talking. So I guess now that we're using StreamYard, we could have a failure between StreamYard and YouTube.
Yeah, very unlikely though.
Yeah. I've never had that. Are you using StreamYard much for things?
I don't do
anything
streaming. When I do stream, I'm using. I used to use OBS. Mm-hmm. But I switched to Ecamm, which is only for Mac. Ecamm Live. I'm grandfathered into their lifetime thing, so I don't have the regular subscription fee, but I also don't get all of the coolest features that the subscribing people get. But that's why I use it. It's much easier and simpler than OBS, and it performs about the same. The last time I was live streaming myself, it was through my MacBook Pro, so performance was a major issue there, but I didn't notice any performance difference between OBS versus Ecamm. But Ecamm just made things easier, like bringing in the comments like you can do here on StreamYard. Ecamm can do that too, as long as you're streaming directly through the connection, through the Facebook connection or the YouTube connection or something like that. If you're streaming through the RTMP destination, that doesn't bring in comments, but the API methods do. Yeah. So that's cool, and you can design it a little bit better and do some cool things with it.
I'm an easy guy, and I like StreamYard, and it just for me, it just works. It's pretty drop dead. We went from doing maybe 1 or maybe 2 podcasts a week at work to 5 during the pandemic. So I was on StreamYard a lot, and I'm getting that. I bought the plan, the $240 plan there, and I'm using every cent of what they're giving me. Those guys, and it's worked out well for us to be able to do it. You're on a new Mac. What do you got?
I got the new 2020 5K 27-inch iMac.
Nice.
And it's It's nice. I was on a 6-year-old MacBook Pro before that, and that 6-year-old MacBook Pro was the best MacBook Pro that existed at that time that I bought it, and it's survived really well. That's a testament to the value of Macs, is how well that thing's held up.
Yeah.
I've only had to get a battery replaced after 5 years. I got the battery replaced. Besides that, it's been beautiful. And but now with the 5K iMac, not only does it mean I have a bigger screen to work on, Retina resolution finally on a bigger screen, because I used to connect to a 24-inch laptop or a 24-inch Dell monitor, but also the extreme power of it, like live streaming without it revving the fans at all. Like right now, if we were using my MacBook Pro, you'd be hearing this constant in the background. But now this iMac Pro, I switched my camera to 720p, which I couldn't do on my MacBook Pro before because of how much it attacks the CPU. I'm on HD now with this iMac, and the fans aren't even running. It sounds like it is wonderful.
Whisper quiet in there.
Oh,
right?
yeah. And the camera's pretty good too.
It is good.
Using the C920 right now though, because because of where I can position it manually, about 7 inches below the actual webcam. I mean, below the iMac's webcam is where I put the C920.
What are you using to to mount it down in front of it?
I got the cheapest mic boom arm I could find on Amazon. Literally the cheapest. I just searched mic boom arm, find the absolute cheapest one. It's $10. It's extremely cheap. And then I got, I forget the actual dimensions, but it's just a little adapter that converts a mic mount screw, the bigger screw, converts that down to a standard tripod mount that the webcam can mount onto. And it works. Screwing and unscrewing it is quite awkward to do, but because there's no ball head or anything.
You got to kind of get the cord wrapped around first, or hold the cord and then kind of screw it on. Yeah, I know. But boom arms make a really good make really good camera mounts.
Oh yeah.
So no, it's a good.
I love it because like right now I can move it directly to the center of my monitor, position it like visually. Right now I have the StreamYard preview just right above the webcam. So when I'm looking at you, I'm looking just like half an inch above the webcam. So it really looks like I'm looking straight into the webcam.
Do you find, and this was always the problem when I put it right in front of the screen. I did this at work for a while. Actually, I had a 30-inch monitor that I had sitting back a ways, right? Probably 6 feet, maybe 5 feet. And then I used a Manfrotto camera mount to go right up in front. Same thing that you're doing there, just a little bit different mount. And I would find sometimes when I was trying to work on the computer, the camera would be in the way, right? I'd have to kind of look around it, if you're actually trying to use the monitor. So I had to stop I just make it a dedicated face monitor. So I'd look straight through at it as opposed to trying to actually do things on it. Because you would notice that camera, when you're talking to people, it disappears, I think. But when you're trying to do work on it,
that and the arm too, like using the boom arm. Now that's something that's going horizontally across in front of the screen. Right. And so that means like the chat room, I just had to move the window so I could see Brian's latest comment in the chat room because the boom arm was in front of that. So I've had to dip around trying to peek what's behind the camera there.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's good. No, it's good to catch up on that. We're not going to talk too much about your hardware during the show as we spend time talking about lighting. So we're excited to do that. Okay, let me, I think we've got enough time has passed. Yeah, I think so. Everything started. It looks like all the notifications have kicked off. Good to see you, Joe, Mark, Brian. And guys, thanks for coming out. I'm sure a few more will join us as we go. Hope you guys are having a good evening.
Link to share this.
theaverageguy.tv/live is probably or if you want to send them right to the YouTube here, I'll put the
want me to send them to.
Well, YouTube's probably the whoops, hold on.
I can get the YouTube channel, the link here.
Either way, whatever you want to do. I have you on not to promote the show, but to bring great content. So you can. But theaverageguy.tv/live is we have a video and the chat room is out there as well. So either way. Okay, you do that. Let me get the show open and we'll go from there. Here we go. This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 460, recorded on September 17th, 2020. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a very beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. Fall has arrived, and you guys know I like fall, and I appreciate it in every way. It's beautiful out there. And, of course, we post a show with world-class show notes. Now, today, and I'm going to introduce them here in just a second, today we got some really good show notes. You're going to want to head out as Daniel talks about what he's going to do. You're going to want to head out and capture those show notes because there's a lot to do out there. But they'll be at the AverageGuy.tv/HGG460. I mentioned him just a second ago, but Daniel J. Lewis is joining us tonight. He from the Audacity to Podcast, and Daniel was on 7.5 years ago. Home Tech Interview is what I called it back in that day, number 4. Not even a Home Gadget Geeks came on, and we talked about audio. Daniel, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's been a long time getting from here to there, but it's good to talk to you again.
It's good to have you. A lot's gone on in our lives, and lots of things have happened. March 8th, 2013 is the date that you were here, and we talked about audio. So if you want to go back, you can just put in Daniel J. Lewis. You'll find him out there. We can go back and talk about that. Daniel, I'll have you sit tight for a second here. We're going to spend, if you're coming in on YouTube and you came in because we've got the subject, which is RGB lighting, that we're going to kind of talk about. Hang tight. We got some community stuff to go through, and then we'll get to that stuff. Daniel always get those comments like, took them 10 minutes to get to the point. We're like, well, that's the point. That's kind of what we do here. So hang tight for me. 1 second. One is I've been using Podpage. Daniel, have you seen Podpage?
Yes, it's a service that when I first saw it, I thought, really? I don't think we need this. But then after I looked at it, I thought, oh yeah, we need this.
It's really, really good. In fact, I'm gonna just get rid of my app. So I've had an app. I've had an iPhone and a Android app. I've been paying $99 each for that. Big thanks to our Patreon subscribers who help me pay for that every year. But I think people are moving away from dedicated apps. I just find like most people that are listening to podcasts are listening to it on their own player. Don't you think? Most people
I think so too. There was that classic thing that, people know how to install an app better than they know how to listen to a podcast. But I think that delta is so much smaller now that we should just tell people to subscribe in their podcast app.
Yeah, I think so. And okay, wait a minute. Before we go too much farther, you've got a great service as well. There's probably nobody that knows podcast and podcast numbers better than you. Can you give us give us a 1 minute little promo of your plugin that helps podcasters?
I made a WordPress plugin. Is that what you're referring to? That one?
Yeah.
Because I've made several things for podcasters. That's what I do, is I make stuff for podcasters.
Yeah.
So the WordPress plugin, and Jim is probably one of the power users of it, is called Social Subscribe and Follow Icons, or for short, Subscribe and Follow. And it gives you, I think at this point, more than 50 different icons, vector icons that you can put on your website, make them into buttons, make them into icons that adjust the colors and such to match, and fonts to match the rest of your site, so that you can put these handy subscription and follow icons or buttons on your site. And when I created it, I used to code this stuff completely manually for some of my clients and for myself. And I thought I could make a plugin for this. And it helps podcasters. It helps social media people. Like, it's the only place, I think it might be the only plugin that has a vector stitcher icon in it, or for a while it was, at least. But it's got, all of the other ones in there. It's had an Amazon icon for a while. So if you're excited about having your podcast on Amazon Music, you can already use the Amazon icon there. You could use the Amazon icon for something else, support us through our Amazon affiliate link. That's not quite their policy though. But things like that you can do, Twitter buttons, Patreon buttons, all kinds of things, GitHub, almost anything you can think of is in it, or simply request it and it will be in it. And that's at subscribeandfollow.com.
Yeah, let me just show it really quick, because I'm super proud of the work. You can see these icons right here. I've got them on the page that are available. And then if you go to the AverageGuy.tv/subscribe, or you just click the subscribe button, you'll actually see all the ways you can subscribe to the audio for Home Gadget Geeks, the video, because we have a video RSS feed. Why wouldn't you? Cyber Frontiers, same thing, that are out there. And Daniel makes all these available. I can customize them. They're super great. So if you were wondering like, hey, how do I subscribe, or how do I find the YouTube channel, or where to go on Facebook, head out to theaverageguy.tv/subscribe. This is all Daniel. Daniel, you're also doing a bunch of stats around, and I think this is the really nerdy stuff, because I think you're one of the few who's got a really good handle on how many active podcasts are there today. If I asked you that question, could you tell me?
Oh yeah, I've got the number in front of me. Wait, active podcasts. Okay, that gets into technical definitions though, because then it's like, how do you define active?
Yeah.
But what I would define active as would be that they've published at least one episode in the last 90 days. They could still be new, but they have at least one episode from the last 90 days. And that's 648,650 podcasts right now.
Oh, 600. So let's say 700,000 active podcasts available. Would that be a fair number to say if we're just going to round it up?
650,000.
Okay.
Yeah, rounding it currently. And that's as of September 17th, 2020. And that number is always fluctuating too.
You also have a service called My Podcast Reviews, right, that are available. So if podcasters want to see the reviews that are available on iTunes, they can subscribe to that. I think I'm doing that as well for you to get those updates. How's that going?
Yeah, that's going well. We have released a brand new feature. No one else is doing this. We basically created this industry of this software as a service for this kind of thing, gathering your podcast reviews. We check all of 175 Apple Podcasts and iTunes countries, plus Stitcher, Podchaser, Castbox, and more coming soon. And we just added a feature that now you can see all your ratings as well as your reviews, because many people didn't realize that ratings can be left without reviews, but every review requires a rating. So you can see like that engagement level to see you have 100 ratings and 80 of them have reviews. That's a very high engagement. But if you've got 100 ratings and only 10 of them have reviews, then you know you need to engage your audience a bit more, help them to write a review. And for helping people write a review, we've got a new feature coming out that I can't tell you about completely yet, but it will help you do that. And that is coming out late September, early October 2020.
Oh, cool. So as we're recording this pretty quick, where would folks go to find that, Daniel?
mypodcastreviews.com. And you can sign up for a free trial over there to check it out and give it a try for your podcast, multiple podcasts, monitor your competitors' podcasts too. mypodcastreviews.com.
It's super cool. You got a lot of great stuff going on in there. I started that with Podpage and then we went totally off the rails, but Podpage, now I've converted homegadgetgeeks.com. So many of you are getting the app through that. And like I said, I'm going to switch over to Podpage as kind of the landing spot, because one of the things I like about it, Daniel, is they've got all the kind of every place you can think about subscribing: Castbox, Overcast, iTunes, Google Play, right? Well, not Google Play anymore, but Google Podcasts. There we go. I'm having trouble getting that out of my, and I think it's Apple Podcast too. I might have said iTunes. So it's tough to get that out of your vocabulary. So if you go to homegadgetgeeks.com, you'll see that's kind of where I'm going to send everybody now who's like new, to say, hey, find your player and you can kind of subscribe however you want. It's there. One of the cool thing that's about it for those who are regular listeners is it's got what some folks have used like SpeakPipe or some ways to get it done, but it has a service associated with it where you can leave a message. So I'd like you guys to try that. If you're listening to it this week or whatever week you're listening to it, head out to homegadgetgeeks.com on the right-hand side or on the mobile device. There'll be a button. Click it. It has a little microphone icon and leave me a message. It doesn't have to be anything productive or even about the show. Just love to hear your voice. So again, head out to homegadgetgeeks.com and we're going to give that a try. We're going to give it a spin. I've really liked what's going on at Podpage. I would never switch away, Daniel, from WordPress. Let's just be really clear. But what they're doing over there at Podpage is pretty cool. Again, homegadgetgeeks.com. And then don't forget, I don't know how you're doing it during the pandemic, but HelloFresh has saved my life during the pandemic. theaverageguy.tv/HelloFresh if you want to take advantage of that. $40 off your first box. Daniel, you've been eating okay during the pandemic? Things going okay along those lines?
Yep.
Okay.
Mostly.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I get a little Caesar's pizza here and there, but
Nice.
yeah, still eating healthy. I enjoy cooking. I really do. But and this is perks to what you can get with HelloFresh. Sometimes just going out and getting the ingredients is something that sometimes deters me from wanting
Yeah.
to cook. It's like, oh,
I
I don't
know.
want to find cilantro because then I'm going to have all of this cilantro left over. I'm never
Yeah.
going to use. It's just going to rot in the refrigerator because all I need is this one little sprig. Yeah.
Tonight we had chicken ravioli, and I was peeling back the ravioli was in a container. You peel it back, throw it in hot water. I made this sauce on a pan in the back. I had exactly what I needed. Tossed the bag. It had nothing left. We ate it all. It was pretty great. It's just two of us, right? It's just my wife and I. Kids are gone. We do have I'll talk about this here in a second. We do have one coming back, but if you want to try that, just give it a try. You can do it 1 week. You can quit it after that if you want. But HelloFresh, give it a try. TheAverageGuy.tv/HelloFresh. Then don't forget September 24th, we're doing the Patreon meetup. So if you're a Patreon subscriber and I haven't heard from you yet, I'll send another email out this week. But next week, Kyle Wilcox will be on the show. Just Patreon subscribers coming in for the first hour, 6:30 to 7:30, and then we'll start the show at 8. Just to meet up, just to get together, see how everybody's doing during the pandemic. We want to make sure you guys are eating well as well. And so check that out. If you want to, there's still time to participate. Go out to theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. Join us over there and you can join us for the meetup. And then don't forget, I'm also going to be scheduling the barbecue, grill, and smoker meetup. That's coming up October 24th. Daniel, we've been thinking about just different ways to get together, and we're going to actually live stream throughout the whole day, folks grilling and barbecuing and smoking. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, my neighbor today was grilling, and when my son and I went outside and we're playing outside, and I just love the smell of grilling meat.
Yeah,
it made me think I have
right?
got to get another grill again.
Yeah, no, for sure. You got to come across one. Look on Facebook Marketplace or some of those. Sometimes you can get a Weber for $50-$60, and that'll get you back in the game. We're going to have a morning session where we do kind of prep and dry rub. We're going to do a noon session where we all kind of check on what we're doing. And then we're going to do an evening session where we kind of come back around. And then I'm going to try and find a few folks who will live stream, and we're going to do it all day. Live stream a webcam on the smoker. Like that's all it's going to be. It's just on the smoker, watching smoke come out. But that's what we're going to do all day. So that's coming up October 24th. By the show next week, I'll actually have an Eventbrite. I just started building that today. I'll have an Eventbrite event for that set up, and you can register and join us. No cost. Just want to have you jump in those as well. Then one more thing. So 5 years ago, we talked about Daniel being 7.5 years ago. 5 years ago, next month, Tim, our son, joined the Marines, and I actually spent some time in show 234 talking about him. We had just sent him off, and the Marines did some really interesting things with social media. And what was super cool about it is I found it really quick on my phone tonight during dinner. I was like, I wonder what I said about that. And we got an opportunity to listen to that podcast where he talked about all the cool things the Marines were doing to keep kind of parents involved and not overseeing their kids, but at least knowing what's going on during it. So it was fun to go back and do that. One of the things I appreciate, just a lot of listeners here that have been around during those times. And it's just weird to think it was 5 years ago. He'll be home on Monday and he's out of the Marines. So for those of you who've been on the show that long and have hung around that long, it's about the time I started Ask the Podcast Coach, to be honest, with Dave Jackson. Thanks for coming on the journey with me. I appreciate it. It's kind of fun. And it was kind of fun to go back and listen. I wonder how many other times I mentioned the Marines in the last 5 years. Daniel is with us tonight because he, by the way, if you want to go out to the show notes, I'm going to have this exact spot listed for you where this conversation starts. So if you haven't started checking out the show notes, I actually now put a little catalog of all the things we talk about in the show notes. And right here will be the time we talk about RGB lighting. Daniel, you reached out to me and gave us a little preview and Ask the Podcast Coach, but you've spent a little time putting in, and we had the guys from Think Computers on, and we talked about RGB lighting for computers, right? There's lots of stuff you can do with fans and lighting inside of computers, but you took it kind of to the next level and kind of lit your whole studio that way. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about what you did. I'm not sure where the best place to start on this is, but tell me, let's just maybe start at the beginning as you think about what was the genesis for kind of outfitting or redesigning your studio with this kind of lighting where you have some control over the temperature and over the color and those kinds of things.
For the first several years of my podcasting and my business helping podcasters, I was podcasting and recording videos and everything from my basement. And my basement has carpet, it has the speckled ceiling, it had a couch, it had a lot of furniture in it. So it really helped the acoustics nicely. And there wasn't much echo, there wasn't much sound from outside because it's a bi-level and so it's partially underground. It was a pretty good acoustic space. Some reverb a little, but it was manageable. And then I moved to corporate space, rented some office space for a couple of years. And that was flat walls, completely squared rooms, no couches, only flat furniture was what I had, desks and screens and stuff. And reverb was a real problem there, especially when I would have an in-studio co-host with me, because one microphone, you have to think about how sound bounces off from your voice back into the microphone. But when you have two microphones open and two people talking, then that maybe more than doubles the problem, because then you've got two voices bouncing at different angles, two microphones picking it up. So reverb became a real problem in that environment. And I tried these cheap ways of treating the acoustics by hanging up horribly ugly looking foam that someone gave me when they were going to throw it away because of how ugly it was. But I thought, no, that could work for acoustic stuff. It didn't really do all that much. It was ugly. It was cumbersome. I tried all kinds of things, and it just either didn't work well. It certainly didn't look well. And I decided, all right, I want to do something that really fixes the acoustic problem and looks nice. I looked at things like the acoustic tiles that you might see people have. They refer to them as like the egg crate style or the wedges. Those are acoustic tiles. They're 1 foot by 1 foot or so squares made out of foam that people would often glue on their walls. Please don't glue that stuff on your wall. Do anything other than gluing on your wall. You will regret it if you glue it. But I knew I didn't want that.
What about like command strips? Would that be okay if you were?
Yeah, that could probably work.
Get it off again.
You just want to make sure, yeah, you can pull it off without leaving the residue.
Right.
But those things actually aren't that good. They do help, but they're just not the best at reducing reverb in your space, especially with my particular space. The reverb was so horrible. And so I was watching YouTube videos and reading acoustic stuff and discovered that panels are the much better thing. A panel would be something that's much larger, much thicker, and it absorbs the sounds much better. And you don't even have to line an entire wall with a panel because sound goes behind the panel. You can have gaps behind the panels. You really only need to think about where is sound bouncing off, and that's where you put a panel, is in those places. But I went a bit overboard and made enough panels myself so that I could have one with only a 6-inch gap on every wall.
On every wall. So how'd you make them? What'd you make them out of?
So the panels themselves, before getting into the lighting, the coolness factor, and anyone watching in the video, and if you're listening to the audio, you'll want to look at the video, because I've had the signature look now for a while with these large black, like 2001: A Space Odyssey looking obelisks behind me. These are the panels that I've created. So the frame is made out of MDF boards and instead of wood. And the reason why I like that is, for one thing, it's something that was recycled from something else. So that's kind of cool. But what I really like about it is MDF boards are completely straight. They're completely flat. You don't have to spend so much time trying to pick one that's not warped or anything like that. They are very easy to work with for precision kind of work like I wanted with my panels. I wanted them perfectly aligned and everything. So I got the big MDF sheets. They're 4 feet by 8 feet. I had them cut them there at the Lowe's or Home Depot, wherever I went. And by the way, if you do the same thing, make sure they have it perfectly straight and the saw is perfectly straight. There was one of the boards I got cut, the board was leaning in the little gap. And so all of the cuts were just slightly angled, and it threw everything off. But it's MDF boards. Also, I think a little bit cheaper than doing the same thing with wood. Certainly higher
especially quality. Now. Especially now, wood's gotten so expensive.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The pandemic has driven the price of wood. Yeah.
Everybody's doing home improvement projects.
Yeah.
I was doing home improvement before it was cool. And so I made these basic frames. There's nothing really fancy about the frame itself. It's just a square frame, and there are some supporting beams in the back of it. And then on the inside of these, so each of the large acoustic panels, like one that I have directly behind my head, is 2 feet by 4 feet. And the insulation, or what I'm using on the inside to absorb the sound, is insulation. Insulation is fantastic for this, and specifically Ruxel Safe and Sound insulation is designed for absorbing sound, and that's what I'm using in this case. Now, you may be thinking, though, some construction, my panels are 24 inches wide. I had to special order the insulation. Didn't actually cost all that much more, but so I could make 24-inch wide panels instead of 16-inch wide panels. And the insulation works great. I've seen some people just layer towels, sew some towels together and layer them, and that can work really well too, and maybe even be a bit cheaper. I didn't know about that when I did the insulation, but after all of this is put together, these panels are about 4 inches thick or so. There's a little bit of space behind them, which is good. Then I wrap them in black speaker cloth because, like Lego Batman, I only work in black and sometimes very, very dark gray, which is actually a problem that I'll get into in a little bit. But I really like the look of black. So I went with black speaker cloth. If I was redoing these, I would probably redo them in white or gray or something else. But I like the black and I like the contrast. So I wrapped them in this black speaker cloth. You can use other color speaker cloth. You could get burlap is also something. You just need sound and air to be able to pass through the cloth. So if you can hold up a piece of the cloth and blow through it and feel your breath on the other side, that's the kind of cloth you'd want for this. So I wrapped it in that. Then I heard that it's best if your acoustic panels are sitting away from the wall a little bit, or whatever surface they're protecting, because that gives more space for sound to get around behind the panel and get absorbed by the panel, as well as more space for sound to dissipate when it gets through the panel, bounces off the wall, and then hits the backside of the panel. So I tried to think of different ways to do this and found a simple hack is door stoppers, not the springy kinds, but the hard, stiff kinds, just from Walmart. Bought every single one at my local Walmarts. I had to visit several Walmarts. I bought them all out of their door stoppers and put them on the 4 corners of these boards and these panels, and made panels in different sizes. I cut some of the insulation to half size. So the result are these large black obelisks, but they work really well. The acoustics is fantastic now with these all over the walls.
I'm gonna make you big screen so we can kind of see kind of what they look like. What's the most expensive part of that? The MDF, and is this the right installation, that the Safe and Sound?
Yeah,
is that the right?
Ruxel Safe and Sound. You can find it, the standard 16-inch stud size, you can find at any local hardware store probably, but the 24-inch, I had to go to an independent hardware store and special order, which didn't cost much more.
And it's designed for fire and soundproofing. So that's pretty cool. So what was the most expensive part of that then, do you think?
I think of the acoustic aspect of it, not the lighting, because the lighting is probably the most expensive, but the acoustic aspect, insulation, I think, is the most expensive, so if you want to save even more money, you could just find a bunch of towels. And when I say towels, they can look like anything. You could go to Goodwill and buy every single towel they have, because you're putting speaker cloth or some kind of cloth over it to hide whatever is in there. Right. So whatever's on the inside doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think? Just for the insulation part, what do you think the end bill is on that? Something like that.
For the insulation itself, I'm not sure. But
think about the panel and the panel install.
Yeah, the whole panel.
Yeah.
So this kind of thing, you can buy this kind of thing commercially for $200 and up per panel.
Right.
Easily, I've seen these kinds of things go for $500. I built these for about $20 to $25 each.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that's including the fancy RGB going into it.
Yeah. Cool.
So thousands of dollars.
One of the things too, and you think about sound enhancing, let's just say that's what we call this, right? Or sound deadening isn't necessarily just for a studio or for
Right.
podcasters. If you've got a theater room, if you've got a spot in the house that's just loud, you could create, and instead of using speaker cover, you could put art in front of it, right? You could use canvas, or you can, and it's a great way to kind of deaden if you got some loud spots in your house. A lot of homes are coming with hardwood floors, and those are super loud and super noisy, and just a great opportunity. They're already Tony's already telling me that they'd look great in the new Home Gadget Geeks studio. I don't know where that new studio is coming from. you of course, so you got new panels up, and that's begging for lights. So let's talk a little bit about what did you give us a little idea what you went through, your thought process as you were thinking about how are you now. And let me ask you this, like, we only see one part of the light, Daniel. Like, we only see what's behind you. Is everything lit that way, or do you just have what's behind you lit that way?
I have, since I've redone the RGB lighting, I have about half of the panels in my room lit that way. I'd love to do them all. It's just not necessary. The lighting is really there for it to look good to the camera, not to me. In fact, when I'm just down here in my studio working on my own, I almost never turn on the lights. For one thing, because of sometimes a little bit of glare off the screen. The other thing is just the color balance. I can't quite get the right color because I went with RGB instead of some of the other options that are available for lighting strips. But it's mainly just an accent thing to look great. Now, it'd be really cool if every panel in my room had it. And where I actually got this idea was a while back. I was looking at maybe moving homes, and I found this one home that the basement had acoustic panels already on the walls with lights glowing behind them. And the homeowner wasn't selling the acoustic panels. They were musicians. I had asked, they had this whole recording studio in their basement. I had asked, are you including those acoustic panels? They said, nah, probably not. But I loved how good that looked. And that's where I got this idea of it'd be really cool to have light glowing behind the acoustic panel, not only just for the fact that that would remove shadows, but what you could do with that when you start adding color.
So talk us through a little bit. So what's it take if I'm thinking about doing something like this? Walk me through the parts list of what's going to be required to do something like you did. Start from the wall and work your way to the panel.
HomeGadgetGeeks.com/HGG460. Did I get that right?
You got it right. Good. Nice job. Yeah. You'll have a parts list out there,
Yeah.
but just kind of walk us through a little bit of what.
Yeah. So I've provided the parts, so I don't need to go into too much detail about some of these smaller pieces, but so I'll first tell you the mistakes I made with this, because I learned some major lessons. The first panels I made, I bought different RGB strips from Amazon based on what I saw going on sale for lightning deals, because I saw, oh, these are RGB SMD 50/50 strips. So they're all going to be the same, right? Wrong. They are not all the same. They're different densities of lighting. Like you could have 30 lights per meter, 60 lights per meter, 120 lights per meter. There are, of course, different SMD, like 38, 28, something like that. There are different styles like that, but I was sticking with SMD 50/50s, which are red, green, and blue are all in one tiny little spot instead of separated bulbs, like separated by an inch or so from each other, each color. But I learned that not all of them were made the same, even though they have the same basic design. And the way you could really see that was if you set them to white. Now, if you want white from RGB, there are different options. Either get white strips, or they make RGB strips that have RGB and white. They even make strips that have RGB plus cool white and warm white. So you can get lots of control there if you want to. And those have different numbers of wires that connect with them too. I just wanted RGB. So these strips that I got, if you put them to white, some of them looked kind of blue, some of them looked kind of green, some of them looked kind of pink. And that messed things up because that meant the color wasn't quite balanced. So if I set them all to blue, Some might look more blue than others, or be brighter than others, or a nicer looking blue than others. So that was a mistake I made. The other mistake, I had no idea about voltage drop. And these RGB strips are really thin. There's very little copper inside of these things. So when you're sending voltage through one end, the lights on the other end will be noticeably dimmer than the lights at the very beginning, because there's so little copper that that voltage just can't be carried in full to the very end. It's very small. And if you're working with 12 volts and you lose 4 volts along the way, then that's 25% of your lighting power. And I could see it on my panels where I would wrap the lights around the back of the panel, start at one corner, wrap it all the way around, end at that same corner. You could see how different the lighting was
from one end to the other. The
right.
light quality would be different. Yeah. Well, you don't think about that, right? You don't think like, yeah, this is a math problem. This is an electricity problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought you plug it in, it's going to be the exact same brightness at one end from the other. And this is cutting the strips shorter than they come. They come in 5, whatever 16.4 feet is. Is that 5 meters? Yes, 5 meters. They come in 5-meter kits. And I just assumed same brightness all the way across. It's not the case. I've learned a lot about electricity since then. And so I'd had all of these different strips. And when I moved my studio back to my home, and I started working with these things again, I was really thinking, I think I might want to redo this first, not because of the lighting quality or the colors, but because I realized I had a safety issue. Somewhere along the way, I realized I've got these 12-volt strips plugged into these power adapters, and they were all the wrong kinds of power adapters. The strips needed 5 amps of power, but I had all of these 12-volt, 1 amp adapters lying around from, old laptops, old hard drives, old everything geeky that have since thrown away, except the power adapters, because I thought I might need that someday. And it was a mess. Like on the video here, I'll show if I move to the side.
Let me make you big screen there. There we go.
What you would have seen before, both in the old studio and before I redid the things here, was you would have seen a wire hanging from every single acoustic panel, because every one of them needed power in order to keep the brightness. And now the only wire I have visible is a wire to a speaker. And everything else, I'll explain how I hid the wires in a moment. But I was trying to think of, how can I make it so that the cables aren't showing? And could I just get better power adapters and connect all the panels together? And that's when I realized my power adapters are not right. And I started looking into things more and realizing, well, I've got this voltage drop problem, and to fix that means buying all new power adapters. But that still means having to have enough outlets for all of these power adapters, and plugging 20 power adapters into my house and running out of outlets. I was just realizing this is going to be a mess. And so I started looking at, all right, I just want to completely redo this and redo it the right way. So that's when I got into looking at things like how, instead of using 12-volt RGB strips, instead getting 24-volt strips, because the voltage drop is the same. There's the same amount of copper, but it's a mathematical difference. 4-volt droppage, 4-volt drop for 12 volts is 25%, but a 4-volt drop for 24 volts is a much lower percentage. So because it's a percentage thing, the brightness difference at the end of a strip was noticeably different using 24-volt strips. The other thing I learned about is that voltage. Did you know you can have voltage being added at both ends of a strip?
No.
I didn't know that. I thought that'd start a fire.
Yeah.
I just didn't understand certain things like that. So just simply splitting the power input and putting it at both ends of the strip, so that then there's a tiny measurable voltage drop in the middle of the strip, but it's not enough, especially working with 24-volt strips. It's not enough to see a lighting difference. So now my panels, it still wraps around in the back with the RGB lighting, but the power goes in once and then gets split and then connects all the way through. So it's much smoother. Getting 24 volts meant different power supplies, but also I was thinking, I really don't want wires hanging down. I don't want to get a bunch of 24 volt power supplies and having all of these wires behind me. That always looked clunky. And so what I did instead is this wall that's behind me in my home. So if you've ever been in the Midwest, then you know what seems like the federally mandated bi-level home, where it's like, let's make a hill and build a house halfway inside of that hill. And let's make it so when you walk inside the house, you're faced with a crisis. Do you go upstairs? Do you go downstairs? Because there's not enough space to stay where you are. You have to make a decision. It's not good for Midwesterners. I don't know why these bi-levels are so popular out here. I hate them.
Tons of them are built that way.
But they do work pretty well for podcasting. And behind me is the stairway that goes up to the entryway and then up to the upper level. So right behind this wall that's behind me is underneath the stairwell, some unfinished area. So I have access to the back of the drywall that's there. So I got this idea that what if instead of powering every panel with a power adapter, how about I get a central power supply, tap off of it as much as I need to, and then just drill a hole through the wall and run the power line directly to the panel that way. And so the end result, I've got a bunch of holes in the wall behind me, but they're behind the panels. The end result then is that these panels are just floating there with the light glowing behind them. These RGB lights that I can change the colors for them. And no wires hanging underneath. It looks really clean. It's now definitely safe. I made sure that I got enough wattage for the power supply, really shopped around for a name brand power supply. Because when you're working with power, I don't think you want something cheap from China. You want something high quality that's not going to start a fire. And I put this all in a nice enclosure. And the end result, I'm really happy with it because it looks very clean. But then, of course, there's also the professional, really cool aspect of it with the RGB lighting.
Yeah. Can you manipulate the colors then on the fly? Are you able to kind of, let's just show us a little bit about what's available.
That's the other thing I wanted to do. I've got all of these smart bulbs inside my home, like LifeX smart bulbs are what I have. So they can be controlled with Amazon, Google, or even Apple HomeKit. And I wanted the same kind of thing from my panels. Instead of having a remote control where I have to point at every single one to turn it on and change the color and all of that, I wanted to be able to control it with my voice. So so I'm not triggering anyone's speakers. I'll mute myself here, but I'll demonstrate what I can do with this. Set the audio background to red. Every one of these panels is connected to its own RGB controller. And so I can manipulate each of them independently, but I made them all one group. So I can change their color to anything I want or any brightness that I want as well.
And individually controlled. So you could do red, white, and blue across that if you wanted to. You would need to name them. You would need to call their names individually, but you've got them put in a group, so they'll all change at the same time.
Oh yeah, like I might be able to do that. Let's see if I have that set up. Set audio background to blue. And moment of truth. No, I must not have the individual ones set up. Stop.
That's okay. That's always we didn't test that in advance, but since they're all on their own individual, you could really do that. Do you have app control as well? Can you go into an app and do it?
Certainly in the app, I could easily go in and set the individual colors of the panels. I could save that as a particular scene. So if I wanted red, white, and blue or any particular specific color to save as a scene, I could do that inside of the app. And I love being able to do that, to adjust the brightness, to change the color, like for a particular mood or something. Controlling it through the app as well as through the smart speaker, and then setting up the routines for that as well. Because like I mentioned, I've got all of these smart bulbs, and what you're seeing me now, and I don't like the red background. I'm just going to change that.
Go ahead and change it back. Yeah.
Set audio background to blue. So I've got studio lighting on me to make me look better exposed for the camera. I also have just regular lights in my office. And so I can turn those lights on and off. My studio lighting isn't as smart, but at least it does have a wireless, not an infrared controller. But I set up a scene. So I can say certain things like turn off the office, and it turns off everything for me. Or I can say switch to podcast mode, and it turns on the audio background to the right color. It turns off the office lights, and then I just turn on the studio lighting on me. And these different routines that I've set up inside of the smart speaker as the workflows, routines, whatever they're called in a particular workflow. And that just, it feels so good to be able to do that. And it's also less frustrating too, having to turn around and press a button pointing at every single one. I've just got so much more control now, and flexibility and versatility, and it just looks so much nicer too.
No, it's super cool. Have you thought about, okay, so in some of the if this and that routines that exist, you can say, hey, when somebody's at the front door or when I get a package delivered, turn my lights on to this color so I know. Have you looked into any of those to kind of change? Because you've got a whole wall. You could create a whole bunch of different visualizations. Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, there are some technical limitations there on what I can do with some of the different devices that I'm using, like the cameras and such. But I have thought about certain things like that. And generally for me, I'd rather not something else have control of my lights. But I do things like with my regular home lights, I do have them on a schedule where they're daylight colored during the day, and then they turn into warmer colors at night, just like the true tone on a screen, or the flux or something like that on your screens, reducing the amount of blue. I tried something similar with the LED lights to see if I could have them kind of complement the room lights. So they'd be like a daylight color during the day and a warmer white during the night. It's just, you can't quite get that with RGB strips. That's where the RGB, and then a bunch of different letters on options come after it, but giving you the warm white, the cool light options after it, like RGB CCT, I think is one, RGB W, RGB WW, I think is another. There are all of these different ones that you just have to consider, what do I really want my lights to do, and then get the right strips for those. For me, these RGB strips behind the panels creating the glow is really just for the visual effect for the camera, not so much for the room. Although with so many black panels around, it did darken the room. So I had to add more lights to the room. So that's what made me kind of wish maybe I should have gone with something where I could have used these as additional room light. But they're just accents, so RGB works fine for me.
Yeah, it looks good. Did you are those lights actually dimmer than they appear to us on camera? Because these C920s have a little sensor, and backlit stuff sometimes is a little dimmer. This monitor here, I can even barely see, and yet it shows up on the camera. Are those, as you look at them, are they as dim as they appear, or talk a little bit about that?
Pretty close. There are some interesting things that I run into with this space, like being farther away from the panels, and lights, the way that my studio lights create shadows or create additional light on my backdrop. But with these particular strips that I got, and the links to these things, everything I bought for this is either from Amazon or AliExpress. So this is your opportunity to really get stuff done. Order something you really want and wait for it for 30 days. You will feel like you've got the world of time to do stuff you've wanted to do. And that's what happened for me. So the strips were from AliExpress. So I could order, I think, 10 strips, all exactly the same, since you don't want to mix and match from Amazon. These are 120 LEDs per meter, very dense. I think too dense, actually. But the advantage of that is that they can be at a very low brightness level and still put out a decent amount of light. And right now, these lights are at 1%. I'll bump up the light here. Set audio background to 100%. And this, you'll see a couple problems come in now. Now they're so bright that they're being exposed as white to the camera mostly.
It almost looks fake. It looks like your background, like now you're in a virtual background.
Yeah. I just need the little ticker underneath with stock symbols and stuff. The other interesting thing that's happening right now, well, you can't hear it, But now there's one of the other panels just finally caught up. The power supply is on the other side of the wall. Some noise does come from it. It has a fan on it that automatically turns on based on how much load is being pulled from the power supply, not based on how hot it gets, just based on how much load comes through. And that fan can be picked up by my microphone at times. And so I've had to play with learning, all right, I can put them up to this brightness level without activating the fan, or I can put this many colors together. Like right now, they're blue. They're solid blue. Only the blue LED lights are on. So that's using 1/3 of the potential power that these strips could pull, RGB, 3. If all of them are on, if I've got them set to white, like I'll do right now, set audio background to white. Now, all 3 lights are on. And there comes the fan.
That looks cool though. If you're only listening to the audio, you got to come over to the video on YouTube and watch that. TheAverageGuy.tv/HGG460. You got to come over and watch that
behind me,
because that really does look fake now. I mean, that almost looks like Jesus has arrived and like the angels, right?
Yeah, it does. It's because I've exposed the camera to how my skin looks, not based on the background. And I've adjusted the background to complement my face. Now, with the lights at white and at full brightness and so many lights, it's so dense. The wall is now a solid white, overexposed to the camera, actually causing a little bit of a lens flare. I just noticed that's kind of a J.J. Abrams effect there. and now the power supply is revving up. Yeah. And one of the other things I discovered is not only to be considerate of the power supply fans when that might turn on. And this isn't a problem for people who are doing this for just their home entertainment or something like that. But if you're recording a podcast, you have to be considerate of what other noise there is. The other problem that came up is coil whine, which PC builders will probably be familiar with. This is one of those other things I learned about in this whole process. I'm gonna turn this off.
We'll stop blinding.
Set audio background to 1%. So I've learned certain things, by the way, of like, I can have it at white up to this percentage level. I can have it at blue at this higher percentage level. And one of my panels needs to be rewired because I did not do a good job on it. And so sometimes the coloring is a bit off. But the coil whine is where there are these different coils that are for different reasons inside of the power supply. And electricity goes through this wire that's wrapped around this thing that looks like a donut with wire wrapped around it. And it's an electromagnetic thing that's happening. And electricians are probably just cringing at my bad description.
It's okay. We understand.
What happens is as this electricity is going through, wrapped around this thing, is it starts to vibrate. And that vibration will cause a high-pitched whine to come out of the power supply. And that happens depending on how much power you draw. So I've learned, like with my system, if I get to just below triggering the fan, that's when the coil whine is the loudest. So I have to find that particular balance of, okay, this is going to trigger the fan, but this is going to trigger the coil whine. And now that I know where those levels are for my particular setup, I can work around that.
Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of testing and judging and like, okay, what does this sound like? There you go. You get your lights back to the way they were. How long do you think it took you from after install to get it all kind of the way you want it, like the way it is today?
As far as figuring out the lighting levels and everything?
Like just as you think about from the time you started doing the install of these things to the time it got to that, what was the duration? How long did you test this for?
For maybe an hour, just playing around with it. Some of it was just playing to see what can I do, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on again, turn it off, turn it on. Just having fun with being able to control a wall of light is pretty fun. You got to admit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The different things that you can do. If you could do anything different now, I mean, it's working, right? And you're going to break it again, probably at some point, just because you're going to try to do something that, you're like, oh, why did I break it? But what would you do differently today if you had to do it all over again? What else? You mentioned a couple of lessons that you learned, but anything else that you learned through the process?
Yeah, some of the things, like when I first got these strips. So these RGB strips are really not made for precision measurements. You can only cut them to certain lengths. Like the strip is wired so that depending on how many LEDs there are per meter, you have these sections and you can cut for each section. And 120 meters or 120 LEDs per meter makes a nice small section, very dense with LEDs, but it's also kind of inflexible because there are so many LEDs in a single strip. And it makes it not so actually physically flexible. It also makes it difficult to cut because the space for the contacts, I found that I have to actually waste a section in order to overcut. So I leave plenty of space for the electrical contacts if I have to connect the wires. So I think two things I would have done differently. One is gotten a lower density strip, so it would be physically more flexible and also a little bit easier to work with some of the connectors and attachments. The other thing is that working with a precision sized thing, it's not just hanging strips on a wall or behind a desk or something like that where it doesn't have to be so precise. Here I have to be precise to half an inch or less than that, or else I'll have things sticking out the edges of my panels and looking clunky. What I started doing, how I did my first panels, was I did this complicated thing where I got a wire-based connector and then I wrapped it around itself to make an overlapping corner, and then had to staple down the excess wire. And so I was making corners with adapters and connectors. And when I got these new strips, I got new adapters and connectors as well. And I started trying to do the same thing, but I discovered like this is a little cumbersome. And then I realized, well, wait a minute. Do I need these adapters? These are flexible strips. By the way, for indoor projects, do not get waterproof strips. You will hate yourself for using the waterproof strips that have
because they're inflexible.
Yeah, they're thick, they're inflexible, they're a pain to work with. If you get non-waterproof strips, they don't have the rubber over them, the clear rubber. They're much easier to work with and they're much more flexible. So what I did instead of the one panel I have that I mentioned where the color is a little wonky is because I still haven't fixed it with this. It's still, the corners are connected with little connectors. All the other panels, all I did is I simply bent the strip to make a corner where, just like taking a ribbon, if you were to imagine, make a corner, a 90-degree angle with a ribbon, you end up with a little bit pinched in the corner. That's fine when you're working with these strips, especially if you've got lower density strips than what I have. That makes it really easy then. And then you can reinforce. The stickiness of the strips isn't quite as good as I'd want for sticking onto the back of these particular panels. So I used a staple gun and stapled in every here and there for just some extra stability and especially near those corners. And that made it really easy. Like doing the corner thing with the connectors and stuff, that was taking me an hour or more per panel. But when I threw that out and decided to just bend and pinch these things, I was able to put the LEDs on a panel in about 5 to 10 minutes, have it fully connected.
Did you find if you did lower density that your power, so you're saying like right now you're running these at 1%. If you would have had lower density, would you have had to push that power up a little bit to get the same amount of brightness that you're looking for?
I have to correct your words.
Okay.
Or you don't realize the words. Let me
just do it. Just do
it. We'll edit this all in post.
No,
it's
okay. We won't. It's fine. I've never worked with these before.
So with lower density, and this is something I didn't realize would happen. The strips I worked with before were 60 LEDs per meter. These new strips are 120 because of something about the way the electronics work. In order to get the smaller sections for 24 volt strips, you had to get 120 LEDs. And I was still, when I bought these LEDs, I was still in the mind of, okay, I'm going to have to cut these at the corners and connect them. So I need to have that flexibility of the smaller sections so I can be more precise in my cuts instead of like 6-inch long sections where now I know I didn't need that. And so with so many LEDs, twice as many LEDs, I can have the brightness down. I'm running these at 1% brightness. I never thought that I'd only need 1% brightness. That's because there are twice as many bulbs back there as my 60 LEDs were. So if I was using the 60 LEDs per meter, I think I could then just turn up the brightness. And I don't think it would have made any difference to how smooth the lighting looks, because I had the 60 LEDs before.
Yeah.
A side note on that, though, the closer the LEDs are pointing at the surface. So my LEDs, I don't think I explained this. My LEDs are on the backs of the panels, or on the frames. They're pointing at the wall. They're not pointing out. They're pointing directly at the wall. The closer the LEDs get to the wall, the more you would see the separation between the bulbs. And you might see, like, that dotted look behind you. That's why I used door stoppers, is to give me about 3 inches of space from the wall, not only for the acoustic benefits of that, but also that gives more space for that light to mix together, so you don't see the individual dots of each bulb. When I had the 60 LEDs per meter, you didn't see those dots. You definitely don't see them with 120 LEDs. But if I was using 60 LEDs per meter, I would probably have to make the brightness just a little bit higher. But the result would balance out that I'd probably still be drawing the same amount of power.
Yeah. Just wondering, with the less, you're pulling a little bit more, but it's not technically more power, because all that works out in the wash. Just kind of wondering, is folks are thinking about, hey, if I was going to do this, thinking through, like, those are great tips already. In other words, no, I don't need the corner connectors. I don't need the, and maybe I want to go lower density on that. I love the idea of the DIY doorstop. I'm sure they just had a screw on the back end, and you just right into the MDF. Do you have to drill out the MDF to screw it in before you put, because MDF's tough to get a screw into?
Well, yeah, everything. And that's the other thing is, before I did this, I never understood the need for pilot holes, drilling pilot holes. Now I understand, because here, if you are as ignorant as I was not that long ago, if you drill, or if you drive a screw through wood, guess what happens? It cracks. Who knew, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know. But just drilling pilot holes. And actually, my braces that help keep the frame together in the back are wood, just because I wanted something cheap. So it is actually wood in the back. It's, I think, 1x2 little boards. That's what I drilled into, because it's a larger flat surface for the base of the door stoppers, and I drilled into that, and then just screw in the door stopper.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds like a great solution. Have you you thought about hooking it up to any kind of vocal or music monitor to go along with the vocals of the music? Imagine if you were talking and it was, that's maybe too much movement for you.
Well, now that it's app powered, it could do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, while we're still talking here, I am going to open the app to see if there is that feature. And that's another thing. Now, there are 2 popular apps that control these things, and this is on the cheap end of RGB strips. You can get stuff like from Philips, the Philips Hue line, or LifeX, or all of these very well-known brands that are digital LED strips. And digital LED strips are so much fancier, where you can actually address each bulb individually, not the entire strip. Like, I cannot make one of those bulbs white. Neither can I change the length of a hair on my head. Pull that scripture in. But with digital bulbs, you can do that, but digital costs much more. So these
those like $80 a strip for Philips.
And these strips, by the way, for a 5-meter long strip, were about $7, I think, from AliExpress.
Pretty reasonable. Yeah.
Hey,
but you waited a month to get them because they're coming from China, right?
Yeah. But the nice thing was, again, I if you're going to go on the cheap side of these strips, do not buy from Amazon. I bought as much as I could. I mean, other stuff I bought from Amazon, but on Amazon, it's hit and miss. I've got all of these other strips that are different coloring, and different quality levels. And you find, like, I found one, finally, I found a good provider on Amazon. And apparently that one strip I bought was their last strip. They're gone. And that's,
Forever.
I think these are just people who buy this stuff from Alibaba.com or the consumer side, AliExpress.com, and resell it on Amazon. I mean, I even thought of that when I saw the prices on AliExpress.
Yeah.
And then when they run out, they're done. They close up shop.
Mhm.
And then you don't know exactly what strip that was. But so on this cheap side of things, there are two controller apps that you'll be looking at for this stuff. One is Smart Life, and the other is Magic Home. And those are the apps that are available for iOS and Android that would control these things and also handle that connection with your smart speaker devices. Only the Google and Amazon devices support these things. But the Smart Life app, I think, looks nicer and is easier to work with, especially the connection process and the setup process is easier. But you don't get as much control in it. Like, if I know I want these to be RGB 50 or R50, G100, and B0, I can set that inside of the Magic Home app, but I can't set that inside of the Smart Home, or was it Smart Life app? And that's based on the controller. So those little RGB controllers that I have that connect to the Wi-Fi are connected to one particular app ecosystem or another. It's not, you can't switch the apps. You're stuck with a particular app. And that's the other thing is, I wish I got different controllers that were Magic Home, because Magic Home lets you set specific RGB values and also save preset colors. So if I know, okay, this is the color I always want to be able to use without making a scene inside of your smart speaker settings, Magic Home gives you that control. The Magic Home app doesn't look as good, but I think it works more precisely than the Smart Life app. But Smart Life is a bit easier to use. So it's a bit of one or the other. And that's the other thing is, and I had no idea about that when I bought all of those controllers.
So Daniel, are you saying we should watch and avoid? I've got an Amazon deal up on the screen right now, 66-foot RGB LED strip for $40. Probably avoid something like this if we were going to go down this route, or no?
Yeah, avoid that. Now that's not too bad of a price. Now, if you bought all the strips you need, if you could get from that one place and they're all the same, I think it's more important to have them all the same than necessarily the particular strips. But what I did find, and I lined up, I had, I think, 5 different strips. I lined them up and I set them all to white. Now, again, you're making white from red, green, and blue, so don't expect it to be a perfect white. But it was crazy how different they made white. And then I could also set them to different colors. Red seemed to be always the same with them, but like I set them to blue, and some of them look more blue than others, and some of them the blue looked more artificial, and that was the weird thing. So I think it's more important that they all match, whatever it is. But the ones I got from AliExpress, and you'll have the link in the show notes for these, I like them. The white they produce from RGB, the white looks white. I was amazed at how good the white looked coming from them. I did not expect that. I just wanted them all to be the same. But yeah, if you're looking at Amazon, just get more than you need, because you're probably going to run out in the process.
No, that's a good point. Is get them all at the same time if you can, because there may be different manufacturing specs. They may be getting the LED lights that they make them with from different places. Hey, Brian in the chat room was asking, curious what the power consumption is on these types of lights. So as you think about, and I don't know if you've put a meter on the lights at all to see what kind of voltage it's drawing, but do you have any idea how much power it's pulling?
Yeah, that was something I had to think about, because I was buying a power supply, like a raw power supply. The company that the power supply brand that I bought it from Amazon, but the brand is Meanwell, and they are very highly rated. I think they're manufactured in Taiwan or China or something like that, but they are very high quality. They're very highly respected. They cost more than what you might find from AliExpress. But the thing was, like I said earlier, working with power and voltage, I don't want to start a fire. So that one thing, I wanted to make sure I got name brand, reputable name brand. And you have to look at things about the wattage. So the strips you're getting set, whether you're on 24 volt or 12 volt. Like I said, go with 24 volt. Almost everything you see on Amazon, like I didn't pay attention to I didn't check the voltage, but that strip you probably found on Amazon was probably 12 volt. Almost everything you'll find will be 12 volt. And 24 volt, you have to really look more closely. So the entire strip will take a certain number of watts. Like I think for me, if I was powering the entire strip fully, all 3 bulbs at full brightness, each strip I think uses 75 watts. So what I had to do was then calculate roughly how much of the strip am I using per panel? How many panels am I using? That's okay. That adds up to this many watts that I need to be able to supply through this power supply. And then the power supplies, you never want to run them at full usage, just for the life of the power supply, as well as you might have to keep in mind the coil whine, the fan noise, anything like that if you're in a studio setting. So all of that, you need more margin with the power supply. So I got now I forget. I need to check my order. Because I went through multiple power supplies. I got one that I learned before I decided I needed to go 24 volt. I bought a 12 volt, returned that. Then I got a 24 volt that had an always on fan. And being a podcaster, I knew always on is not good for me. I need more control over the fan. So I returned that and got, all right, it's my particular one for all the panels that you see behind me. There are, let me look, 6 panels behind me. 4 are vertical, and then there are 2 actually horizontal, stacked above them at the top that you usually don't see, but I have too many panels. So I was just thinking, where can I stick another panel? Because I've got too many now since I moved home. So I got from my needs for all of these panels, plus other panels that are in another part of this room for video use. It's the Meanwell HRP 600-24. So it's a 600 watt power supply. I think I misspoke when I said 75 watts per strip. I think it's actually much lower than that. I forget the exact number, but you need to look at those strips. Generally, every particular configuration of a strip, like 120 LEDs per meter at 24 volt, every brand is going to be about the same wattage consumption. So once you know that, then you can just do the simple math of, all right, this many strips are going to be connected to this power supply. So I need at least this many watts.
I think you're right. In that strip we were looking at, 12, those are 12 volts. And then I think down here it says 65 watts, maybe per length. So per 16 feet. Would that be, do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that is accurate. Yeah.
Okay.
65. Okay. Yeah. So it must be 75 watts for the full. Yeah.
If it's on full blast.
Yeah. That's
I would imagine, right?
Is that since I'm running these at only 1%, and that's not 1% of the total power usage. That's more like 0.33% because I'm using 1 bulb out of 3 potential bulbs, and that 1 bulb is running at 1%. Yeah. So I'm barely tapping the power that my power supply can provide. But if I didn't get the kind of power supply that I did, when I did that thing where I set it to 100% white, where every bulb was on at full brightness, I might have started a fire if I didn't have the right power supply.
Yeah, no, it's important you get that right. And so it's good. Those LEDs have some energy efficiency to them. And so like in your case, you can really dim those things down and get what you're looking for in there. It looks good, Daniel. Looks really good. Anything else? Any other advice you'd give if somebody was like, all of a sudden now I want to put like LED lights underneath my, my shelves. That's a real common, right? Oh, yeah. That's a real common look.
Yeah, I might do that eventually too over with my bookshelf. Yeah.
Where else would you put them? I've seen a lot of people put them like behind couches.
Yeah.
So to kind of shine up the walls that way. Where else?
Well, you can You can use stuff like this, or just buy an outright bias light to go behind your TV. So there's a slight glow behind your
There you
TV.
go.
It's supposedly
Yeah.
better for your eyes if you're watching a screen in the dark. Since I have leftover strips, I plan to, line my bookshelf with them eventually, because right now, when I've got the studio lights and everything on, my bookshelf is just this blackness back there. I've got my podcast award back there. You can't see it in the darkness. and I've got cool little things back there, Lego things and stuff. You can't see it at all because it's so dark. So I'm thinking of adding some strips inside there, and also maybe just along the back of my desk to give kind of my desk that sort of bias lighting. Some of that just starts to get, well, I was going to say that starts to just get fancy, but as if this wasn't already fancy back there.
I don't know. This sounds kind of cool. At first, Tony asked me early in the show, "You're going to set that up in the new studio?" Daniel, there's a running joke. I can't say it too loud because my wife's on the other side of she wants to move, and I'm dragging my feet. So, I really don't want to move. So, I've been joking that the new studio that we go to, but I'm actually in a pretty good spot here where I could, I have a shelf here and a dresser. I don't need any of that stuff there. There's actually an open wall. I don't even have any drywall on it at this point. It's completely, I could add all the wiring that I want behind the scenes, wire it all up that way, put the drywall on it with some outlets for each one of those panels, and then install the panels right into the outlet, right?
I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
Don't put up drywall.
Oh, okay.
Because you put the insulation in the wall, and just put speaker cloth or some kind of whatever you want over it. So, because if you put the drywall up, then you're creating a surface to reflect noise. And if you really want to have a noise-free environment and you don't need drywall, then you would get much better results by actually leaving it slightly unfinished with the insulation there, and then just put the speaker cloth or something over the walls so that it looks good. And then it would be, your whole wall would be an acoustic panel then.
Yeah. But then I couldn't have the contrast like in the panels that you have there. Although there's some probably different ways to do that.
Yeah, you could do some different things there. Like even Dave Jackson from School of Podcasting and Ask the Podcast Coach has these the lights that people get for outside to shine on their home. They make those things now in RGB and controlled by smart speakers. And I see these things go on lightning deals all the time on Amazon. You could get a few of those, like mount them kind of like rack mounted lighting pointing down on your walls, maybe put a couple on the floor pointing up, and then you could color your entire wall with something. And you couldn't have the contrast of black, blue, black, blue, black, blue like this, but you could still do really cool things.
Yeah.
And by the way, I teased earlier, I wanted to make sure I mentioned this. Why I regret going with all black is because if you're recording in a studio environment where you're doing the lighting kinds of things with a webcam and such, having a very dark background makes automatic color exposure from webcams very difficult, because the way the webcams typically work is they're looking at the overall scene and trying to expose it for that. So if I was letting my webcam do automatic exposure, I would be bleached out like a ghost right now because there's so much darkness in the scene. The other problem is, and I had to change my t-shirt before doing this tonight. If I was wearing a black t-shirt, then you just see this floating head and it would look really creepy. And I used to have this high back black, of course, chair behind me too. So I have to be a bit more conscious about the clothing I wear because everything behind me is black. Now, if it was white or a gray or something like that, I wouldn't have to be so concerned, but stuff disappears in black. Stuff doesn't disappear in white, but it does disappear in black. So that's why I kind of wish I might have done something differently there. But then again, when I look at how I just like the black and the blue LEDs, I've been a big time fan of blue LEDs for, I might have gotten it from the Daily Gizwiz podcast many years ago. If you ever listened to that, I remember, Dick DiBartolo from there once said something like, I love anything if it's got a blue LED. I think it was around that time that I realized, you know what? I think I do too. Blue LEDs are cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it looks good. I like it. It's a good look. Again, I've always kind of gone with this kind of homey look. I've moved things around. I'm always shifting things around. Lately I've been throwing a bunch of monitors up there just to kind of have something. Haven't really thought about it, but this just gets me thinking a little bit. Kind of like, oh, I could mess around. I'm in a spot where I could do it. I mean, but already people, I don't know if you ever had that. If you have a home service person come in, like the guy who sprays for the bugs, or like if I have a plumber come down downstairs, they come to this office location. Now I've got 8 monitors and 4. That's 8's just on the desk, and then there's 4 back here. And they're like, what do you do again?
Yeah, what do you do here? I used to get that all the time too. The cleaning staff at the old office, that they go from office to office. It's like lawyers, massage parlors, accountants, just the same old. And then they get to my office and they're like, whoa, what do you do here?
Exactly. Yeah, I had my own kids this morning. I dropped my kids off at the airport, so they came over early, like 6:15, and I drove them in, and they came in, and I was waiting for them. So I was working on my laptop here from work, and they were like, what do you do with all these monitors? I had them all off so that, I was just on the 2 work on computers, but I like real estate. That's what I like. I like screen space.
And your look does look nice. It's a completely different look from my look. I would describe mine as probably edgy, modern, or edgy, high tech looking, and that's kind of just me. I tend to like that kind of thing. From a kid, one of my favorite TV shows as a kid was Beyond 2000, and I like that modern, high tech sort of look. Yours is a very comfortable, very warming, very welcoming, still professional look. And I like that too. I see many different people have their, their studio look with different things. And some people, have all of these cool little gadgets or toys or things on the background behind them. Yeah. And that stuff looks cool. And sometimes I'm that kid who, when I got the opportunity to mix ice cream toppings or sodas or something like that, I mixed everything together and ended up regretting it because I wanted to taste everything.
Oh, you sound like one of my sons who used to do that all the time too. Yeah, we called it a suicide, right? When you would mix all the sodas together, or all that. Listen. I still like to go to Quick Trip. We have Quick Trip. You guys have Quick Trips, right?
No, we don't have them here, but I do have the cups in my car for whenever I'm traveling through a place with a Quick Trip.
And they've got all the slushy. They have all the slushy flavors.
That's why I carry the cups with me.
It's so good. So good. It's so much sugar. Like I am on a sugar high for weeks after I go. One summer, my wife was out of the country, and I had the 2 small kids with me. We were doing construction projects while she was gone. And every afternoon I would reward good behavior with the 2 by going down to Quick Trip, and we get slushies. And man, I must have had about 8 pounds of sugar through that week of a slushy a day. It never ends. Daniel, thanks for suggesting. By the way, you jumped on Ask the Podcast Coach last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess now. Mm-hmm. Again, gave us a little update there on your Mac as well. There's a little bit of an update if you're only listening to the recorded show. We actually, in the pre-show, talked a little bit about his Mac. So if you're interested in getting kind of an update on some new hardware from Apple, that's available in the pre-show. You can find that on the Patreon page. If you want to do that, head out to theaverageguy.tv/Patreon and subscribe. Love to have you as part of a supporter, and thank everybody as a Patreon supporter for doing that as well. Don't forget, we have the September 24th. That's next week. It's next week as we're recording this live. We'll have the Patreon subscribers out for that as well. Not too late. Head out to theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. You can join us pre-show for the hour before the show. Join in. We're just going to kind of have a good time together, and I want to get to know the Patreon subscribers a little bit better, so we appreciate you doing that as well. If you want to join us in the Discord group, theaverageguy.tv/Discord will get you there as well. Of course, you can always send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, and we'd love to hear from you. Always love your feedback. Appreciate that. Want to remind you that theaverageguy.tv, the both media and web hosting powered by Maple Grove Partners. If you want to get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust, and that's Christian, right? He's been doing this for 10 years with me. We call that in the industry, we call that self-hosting, but Christian does a pretty good job of having a pretty decent infrastructure set up for us. And so you can get plans as little as $10 a month that gets you web and media hosting together with plenty of power and a ton of bandwidth. MapleGrovePartners.com. Daniel, thanks for coming out tonight. Always great to have you. One more time, where do folks, like if folks want to find you, what's the best place to go to get everything?
Go to theaudacitytopodcast.com. That's my podcast about podcasting. That links to all the other products and services I have. That's also where you can contact me if you want to send any questions and such. I will be trying to keep an eye on the comments for this episode as well on the show notes page, in case you want to post any comments or questions there. And so theaudacitytopodcast.com, my main site, and I'm on most social networks as the Daniel J. Lewis.
And if they wanted to do any of those things we talked about at the beginning of the show, can they get to all your plugins and all that other stuff through the Audacity to Podcast, all that stuff there?
It's all there. Nice, near the top, easy to reach.
All right, perfect. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at the AveragegGuy.tv live. Kyle Wilcox joining us next week. He'll be on to talk about he's been doing some stuff in schools. He's got the, what's the name of that camera? He came on. That's the podcast coach. Mimo? No. Now we'll have to find out next week. You'll have to come out and find out what kind of camera he's been working on and some new stuff with his school. We'll see you next week. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody. Daniel, thank you for the live audience is still on. We do a post show kind of thing here. Just so you know, one time I got talking and somebody thought I turned it off, and like, oh no, there's still people listening. You want to be careful. So, but thanks for that. Brian says, learned a lot. Thanks.
Oh, that's cool. I felt like I went down some really deep rabbit holes.
Well,
if nothing else, I've heard that my voice can help people sleep. So
no, you're in the rabbit hole show. Like, I don't know if this is a rabbit hole show. That's why that's kind of why we exist, is to go down the rabbit hole. So a lot of folks, we're this is a little bit different than some podcasts where like, give it to me in 15 minutes. No, we're going to talk for an hour and a half. That's pretty much
good. That was the other thing. I realized at one point, wow, we've been talking for a long time. I don't remember how long this podcast is supposed to be.
Well, it's almost always an hour and 20 sometimes. Okay. And we I cut out some of the pre-show in the beginning. So between an hour 20, hour 30 is kind of always, I don't really care. This is the, we have 600 to 1,000 in the audience that listen to this every week for some reason, and it works that long. That's I resist against that podcast notion that you have to go short,
right?
To get stuff done.
Yeah, my worst interview ever. Did you ever listen to that podcast, by the way, from the guy from Ringer that created Ringer?
No.
Fun podcast about podcasting. He interviewed people to talk about their worst interview ever, because Ringer, was the service for interviews. And I was one of the guests on his show. The other episodes are really fun too. But my worst interview ever was I was a guest on someone else's show. And somewhere along the way, I thought it was going to be a half-hour long interview. We were talking about Once Upon a Time. The show went on for 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
And now some of our episodes for the TV show went on for almost 3 hours as well. Maybe it wasn't 3 hours. Maybe it was more like 2. It felt like 3 hours. Because this show host was not a good show host. He was very slow, and his conversation was very disjointed. And it was one of those that I just threw the whole thing after the first 20 minutes. I was like, please let this be over.
End this sometime soon. End the madness. I did one, boy, and my audio was terrible. Oh, I remember doing one time, and I thought I was on the mic, but I was on the camera mic, and the host didn't know to say, "Hey, you're not on your regular mic." So I get done, and I'm thinking, man, that's okay. That was pretty good. And then I went back and listened later or something, and you hear that really distant, far away, and I'm like, oh my God, that's not going to work for me. You can't use that. Yeah, you cannot. I did an interview one time, and I couldn't get to this mic, and then so I was on a lapel mic on an iPhone, and the host was like, it's fine. I'm like, no, I think we should reschedule. And we ended up doing the interview, and I listened to it. I was like, nah, you can't use that. It's just not. No, that's just not going to work for me. So. Well, I think live audience, I think with that, I think we're going to do a short post show.
Anthony said wordplay on Audacity with
Oh,
the
yeah.
title. Yes,
Yeah.
it is a wordplay.
Yeah. So you did do that on purpose?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I started the podcast, I mean, back then I thought the podcasts about podcasting space was crowded back in 2010 with the 2 other podcasts about podcasting that I knew existed back then. Cliff Ravenscraft's old show, Podcast Answer Man, and Dave Jackson's show, School of Podcasting. And what I noticed listening to those shows was they would talk about their preferred audio editor. Like for Cliff, it was Audition. For Dave, I think back then it was SoundForge or something like that. And they would just say something like, "You can probably do this in Audacity too." And those were the times when I talk back to the podcast. And that's when I realized I need to start a podcast too, because I've got something to say. And that something to say was, no, tell me how to do it in Audacity. Okay, I'll tell you how to do it in Audacity. Yeah. So I thought, okay, I want my podcast to be about podcasting. That would always be the focus first, is about podcasting. But I wanted to be the show that would also tell you how to do something in Audacity and would sometimes focus on Audacity. So I wanted to be found for SEO if people were searching for stuff like how to podcast with Audacity, which I haven't checked lately, but for a long time I ranked as one of the top results, if not the top result for that, partially because of that name. But it's also always been about the other meanings of the word Audacity, the guts, the courage, the power, the might to podcast. And that tagline, giving you the guts and teaching you the tools, has always been part of the Audacity to Podcast branding. And so, yeah, it was that double meaning. Now, I kind of regret that, especially since I reached a point where I felt like I've talked about everything there is to talk about with Audacity, everything significant. Yeah, there's an update here and there worth talking about. But I moved beyond not only talking about Audacity, but using Audacity as well. And even like Dave Jackson, when he first saw my show, I had a few episodes out at that point. And I remember the first thing he said, and he said it in his podcast. I was like amazed that, wow, he discovered my podcast. He said, he hasn't talked about Audacity yet. And so I do kind of regret that confusion, because often when I say it's called the Audacity to Podcast, people say, "Oh yeah, I use Audacity," and I've tried to change that connotation, that understanding, by redesigning the branding, like making sure the Audacity really stands out more in the logo, changing the color to red, that boldness, redesigning my icon, my trademark icon, so that the exclamation point in the icon is more obvious than it used to be before, certain things like that. And also in the podcast, making sure that when I say the name of the podcast, I used to emphasize it more than I do more recently, but saying the Audacity to Podcast, and just trying to convey it in that way so people understand that it's really about that. I mean, it would have helped more if people thought about Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope, more than the Audacity software. So I kind of put myself in a little bit of a hole, but I've thought about changing the name before to other things, but I just thought, no, the branding is so strong now, and people know it as this. I don't want to change the branding. Yeah. And one of my products,
you shouldn't.
One of my products, I keep thinking about changing the branding for it. I'm not going to say which one, because that would give away what might change in the future. But so that might change. But the Audacity to Podcast, like I thought of Audacious Podcasting. Don't worry, I've already got audaciouspodcasting.com. I'm never going to let it go. When I register a domain, I hold on to it for life. It's like a covenant with me and the domain. But the Audacity to Podcast just sticks. And
yeah, no, that's good. I think it's a strong brand. Yeah. I'm still an Audacity user. That's my preferred platform of choice. I've had Audition. I bought the Adobe suite for a while and did it, and I was like, no, I still go back to Audacity. So it's a good little editor, and every once in a while I still get a question from somebody like, what do I use?
Yeah.
Like, well, there's a lot of things you can use, but Audacity is pretty great and it's pretty free.
Did you listen to that episode I did where I interviewed one of the creators of Audacity for the 15th birthday? I never knew Audacity was originally created not for audio editing, but for scientific use. I think, was it medical use, maybe even, but it was some kind of scientific use for needing to do waveform analysis or something like that. And then at some point they evolved it into an audio editor. But yeah, the 15th anniversary of Audacity, I interviewed one of the co-creators.
Well, that's
of it.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. Were they pretty willing to come on?
Oh yeah.
You have to work? No, you didn't have to work very hard to get them to.
No,
to
not
come
very
on.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, they well, for a while, you know, since I was talking so much about Audacity, they would link to me. I'm apparently very well known in that community. But yeah, it wasn't.
Well,
it wasn't
your stats stuff is getting pretty well known as I hear Todd and Rob talking about it all the time, and it's popping up. So whatever you're doing on the stats side of things, it's getting noticed.
I love what, I don't know who originally said this, but I heard it from Brian Kane. Brian, the real Brian, you know, former. You might have met him at one point or seen him.
Long ago.
He said it's not who you know. It's not what you know or who you know. It's who knows you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the advantage I have with the podcast industry insights that I've been publishing. Is that it's who knows me, and also who I know, because I'm connected with the right people with that, and so that's why putting this number out there and being an independent person too. You know, for Blueberry to say something, it's Blueberry's number, and everyone's going to think, that's Blueberry, a hosting company. Well, I'm not a hosting company. Yes, I'm now an advisor to a hosting company, but I still consider myself independent.
But Todd Cochran calls them Daniel Stats. So that's like that's like your name is the brand of the stats. Like they're not some kind of whatever. They're Daniel Stats. And he says that a lot. And
it's kind of awkward having them under the My Podcast branding. Like that's where they live right now. Is mypodcast.com/stats is the pretty link for it. And that's because of the stats evolved from something else I was doing in evolving the My Podcast Reviews service. And so I thought, well, the stats can kind of be an extension to this because of something else I'm working on. But now I really see the stats need to be their own thing. And so they are going to be their own thing. Yeah, if you click on, industry stats up there. Actually, just today, I launched the WordPress site for it. But the industry stats are going to be spun off to their own website very soon, and it's actually going to become another membership site that I'll make, where you'll have like that stats page will be public, but then you're going to see these same kind of stats for only Libsyn podcasts or only Blueberry podcasts or only podcasts in the technology category, only podcasts in the comedy category, something like that. So you could see, how many comedy podcasts have there been growing over time? How many comedy podcasts were added or removed in the last few days and that kind of stuff. And that's going to be behind a paywall, more for the industry professionals, not for the average podcaster. So it's going to be at a higher price. But so those people can get access to that, see the deeper stats, also APIs behind it, so they can integrate it into their own dashboards if they want.
Right. Yeah.
So that's going to be cool. That spinning that off, as well as continuing to mature My Podcast Reviews.
95,000 podcasts added in the last 30 days.
That is not the highest it's been. Scroll down just a little bit more there. So this is the chart. Look at June
here.
Yeah, that
133,000. Wow, during the pandemic. Yeah, you can really see the pandemic ramp up.
Yeah.
And now it's pulling back. Do you think we're going to see what would be your prediction? What level would it go back? It's going to go back to?
I think let me look at my copy of the chart so I can see the numbers easily. I think it's going to go back to probably somewhere around 50,000 per month. We're already in September. We're already at 53,000 added so far this month.
So pre-pandemic levels, we were probably in February, we were at 43.
Right.
So
Yeah, I think it's going to be somewhere
Okay.
around 40 to 50,000 per month.
Do you think it eventually just like I can't imagine that's a sustainable number in, I would think at some point it would drop below 10,000 a month. Just I don't know if it's sustainable.
Well, it depends on what happens with Anchor.
Yeah.
And I'm independent, so I can say this.
Yeah.
Most of the podcasts that are added to Apple Podcasts are from Anchor. Most of them are abandoned quickly afterward.
Yeah.
And Anchor is just polluting the space with these abandoned podcasts. I think it's because Anchor makes it so easy that people don't even realize what they're doing, that they are launching a podcast into Apple Podcasts and into the world.
Right.
And that then it stays there for forever. Because, like Libsyn, any of these paid hosting services, the reason their activity levels are so high is because when you stop paying, your show gets removed.
Yeah.
So the majority of shows on all of the paid platforms are still active, have published episodes in the last 90 days. Now, there are those shows that haven't, but the people who host those shows are continuing to pay the bills because they want their podcast to stay online.
Yeah.
They consider their podcast timeless for some way.
What if Spotify just says, we're getting out of the podcast creation business and closes Anchor? You think that's possible?
I don't know. Because you look at it financially, and at least from the hosting cost perspective, Anchor is a drop in the bucket for Spotify.
Yeah.
From the personnel perspective, people cost a lot more than bandwidth. So from the personnel perspective, Anchor could cost a lot more, especially since, there's this thing in business where the people who pay less tend to cause more trouble than those who pay more. It's a really weird thing.
No,
the people who pay less end up costing you more, basically, too. So since Anchor is free, the people on Anchor, and I don't know this for sure, this is just assumption here, major assumption on my part. It's very possible that the people on Anchor are more demanding for support, and so that might end up costing Spotify. But the technology and the brand, Anchor as a brand, and for what they've created with how easy their app is, far more valuable than the reach, I guess you could say, of it. I think it's far more valuable for Spotify to hold on to that and to be associated with. You want to start a podcast easily? Use Anchor, and you even instantly get on Spotify too. That's the other thing too, is Spotify wants to be the place people consume audio, and the more they can get people instantly getting on Spotify, the better. And at some point, I think Apple will probably stop allowing Anchor to auto-submit so many shows so quickly. And when that happens, then you're going to see the additions per month significantly drop. Because last time I checked, I think it was 75%, somewhere around 75% of all new shows in a given period are hosted on Anchor. And if we could assume that maybe half of those are dead on arrival, then if you cut that out, or just make the process just a couple more steps or verification or requirements or something like that, so you're not flooding the space.
Some kind of speed bump. Do you think, when did Anchor show up? Do you know what month and year Anchor began to be the juggernaut of new podcasts that it is today? Is it 2018, late 2018?
I think it was somewhere in 2018, maybe 2018 or 2017.
Trying to remember, because it's been a steady climb, but man, and certainly I think the pandemic, we had folks who all of a sudden realized, oh, maybe I need to create, this is all going to be digital, right? I think a lot of that happened. We certainly, we've been at Gallup, we've been podcasting since, when did I do it? 2012, I think. And I did, this year I'll do twice what I did last year. Just from internal demand. That's not me ramping up demand. That's my marketing team coming to me and saying,
Oh, nice.
hey, we need to add some dates. And that's some internal people. Hey, I want to do some shows,
Nice.
Even internally, they began to ramp up. And I'm getting more requests to do shows for
Oh, that's
things
so
that are
good.
good. So yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, I have a really progressive comms team that is really latched onto this, and I don't even have to now come up with the content. I mean, I used to do everything, and now they're like, okay, we got this idea, and they run it by me. It's awesome, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Get me the people. We'll do these things.
Nice.
And so it's super great. Yeah, we'll cross. One of our shows is going to cross 1 million. Well, that's the first show that we've had to do 1 million downloads as a single show, and that'll happen, I think, in November.
Total? You're saying total lifetime?
Yeah, total lifetime downloads of 1 million. Nice. So for a niche,
yeah,
I'll take it. I'll take 1 million. That's pretty great.
Yeah, that's the thing. The niche that having a podcast about podcasting. Okay, I know if there are 1.4 million podcasts out there, that's 1. Okay, if I say there's 650,000 active podcasts, that means, my maximum reach is somewhere around 650,000 podcasters, but not really. But I know like the niche of podcasts about podcasting is much smaller, but it's more valuable in so many different ways to look at profit.
For sure.
Not just money, but other aspects of it. And like I say that I can't afford to have a sponsor on my podcast,
right?
Because I think it would hurt my promotion of my other products that make more money than a sponsor would.
I'm in the same boat. I just had a meeting with the comms team today, and we had a new intern that was joking about YouTube monetization. I was like, no, like we are not going to turn on YouTube monetization. Like this is an ad for us. The whole thing is an ad, and we provide great content. So people love it, but the thing is an ad. We do not want to advertise against ourselves. And I've only recently, that's not really true, but I monkey around with, I used to do the Amazon stuff, but that got really weird. So I stopped doing it, and then
the fulfillment by Amazon or something.
The affiliate stuff with Amazon affiliate marketing or affiliate, whatever they call it. And I'm just finding it's just a lot easier to do things where we have that relationship. Like you get, like HelloFresh, somebody gets 40, I get 20. I'm gonna do in October. I'm gonna do StreamYard. They have a program where you can, if you promote their link and people pay for their service. It's a lot more fun, and I like supporting the vendors that I use as opposed to go buy something on Amazon. I mean, it's okay.
Well, but you see, like for me with the affiliates, and I do well with affiliates, and the reason I do well is because they're natural. They're contextually relevant.
Right.
I mean, like, is it okay to say to the audience what you put as a comment to me in the
totally?
So in our documents, I don't know how many people are still watching live, but
there's a handful.
In our Google Doc preparing for this episode, I jotted out my notes and listed my gear and put all of my links in there, and I wrote in there, Jim, you should affiliate link these. And then he commented back saying, you said, I don't do affiliates. Go ahead and use your affiliates if you want. So that kind of thing, like that's an opportunity that you're missing, and you're missing. You don't mind it, but that's that kind of thing that helped me, because my episodes from years ago talking about microphone XYZ is still earning money today because of the contextually relevant affiliate links. I tried for a little while in my Once Upon a Time podcast about the TV show, using my Bluehost affiliate as kind of an ad spot. And I even tried to make it relevant by saying, hey, if you want to create your own fan website for the TV show Once Upon a Time, then use this Bluehost link, sign up for this, and you can start your own blog. You could share your own opinions there. I tried so hard to make it relevant, make it fun, make it memorable. I don't know if anyone ever signed up for that. It never stood out. It never seemed to show up to me if anyone signed up. In fact, I'm pretty sure no one signed up for Bluehost through that, even though I'd made it relevant, because the product wasn't relevant to my audience and the content. But
well, and honestly, I'd rather you benefit from it. You're the guest, and you did all the work, and so I don't need to benefit from those. I just prefer the guests in a lot of cases, And that's just, I think that's just the way it should be in the way we do things here. So I did it for a while. It was kind of for me, it was kind of an accounting mess. And so I was just like, I'm just going to scrap it. And I just prefer to do the affiliate relationships that I have.
Yeah, because for you, everything with the average guy is just a side thing, right? Just, I mean, it's an average guy thing.
It's just fun, right?
Yeah. For me, everything podcast related, even my comedy podcast and the TV show fan podcast, were all aspects of my business.
Yeah. No, right on. I have huge admiration for you guys that are doing this as your job, because I don't, I get to podcast at work and I don't have to worry about paying the bills, right? For the most part. Now, this pandemic time, lots of questions have been asked around the organization about the worth of everything. Oh, yeah. So you got to stand up for it when it comes around. But I got 10 or $15 million behind it to say, no, it's a pretty big, guys. It's a pretty big, doesn't generate that by itself, but it supports that revenue, kind of that revenue stream. So you kind of go, no, it's okay. We should be okay with it. So it's kind of fun to be able to do it. If you're listening live, and there's a few of you still doing it, thanks for doing it. We'll see you guys next Thursday, and looking forward to meeting with the Patreon folks. So if you're still listening, you're on Patreon. We'll see you 6:30 Central next Thursday. Take care, guys. Daniel, hang tight.